As we've been reporting, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, the British-Iranian aid worker who was detained in Iran for 6 years, has now been allowed to leave.
Yes, amazing news. She has given back her British passport yesterday, and a short while ago her MP Tulip Sadiq said Nazanin is at the airport in Tehran and on her way home.
It's a fantastic news, this, isn't it?
Yeah,
We've interviewed
amazing.
her husband several times, actually, and he's been on hunger strike, bless him, and this, that and the other. So, oh, gosh, you can only imagine what they must be feeling now. But we are now joined by Sir Malcolm Rifkind, former Foreign Secretary and former Chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee. Good morning, Malcolm. Thank you very much. A short notice, I imagine. But look, I'm going to get right to the point. Yeah, we're getting a lot of people in our inbox. Look, this is great news. We can all agree about that. But we've got a lot of people in my inbox right now saying, hang on a minute, I didn't think we paid people for taking people hostage. Have we paid the Iranians?
We've only paid what the government acknowledged quite some time ago. We actually
400 million.
Well, this is not blood money. It's not payment. It's not payment of blackmail. This all goes back to a deal that the Shah of Iran wanted to buy military equipment from the United Kingdom and paid in advance for it. Then the Shah was overthrown, and the United Kingdom has kept on to the money that they were paid, although they never supplied the goods that they should have done. So this is not blood money. This is a debt that Britain has acknowledged was due to Iran. The problem appears to have been that because of international sanctions against Iran, the British government said they couldn't pay this sum until the sanctions were removed. And that has taken a terrible long time, far longer than it should have done, to resolve.
We weren't paying them before Putin invaded Ukraine, were we? Do you think some things happened there?
No, I don't know. It's got actually nothing to do with that. There have been negotiations. I've not been involved in them. I'm not a minister. But I know that there have been very detailed discussions with the Iranians. And the United Kingdom government acknowledged some time ago that the money was due to Iran. And they were having to discuss with the United States and with other Western countries whether they would be in breach of the sanctions imposed on Iran for other reasons if this money was now paid. The Iranians, not surprisingly, but in a very disgusting way, linked it to Nazarin's imprisonment and refusal to let her leave the country.
Yeah, and just broadly on that point, Sir Rifkind, I mean, how do you react to this news? I mean, it must just be incredible news for the family, words struggle to describe. I mean, what's your reaction?
Well, this is quite apart from the politics involved, quite apart from all the serious and difficult issues that had to be reconciled. This is a human story. This is a woman who's been deprived of her family, of her children, her child for 6 years now, and never knowing how long this could last. I mean, each time she actually was given a sentence of 5 years by the Iranians. She had completed that whole sentence, and then they didn't release her. So the Iranians have been pretty ghastly and brutal in the way they have used her for other reasons.
And also, just a word actually for her husband. I know Nazanin is obviously the one who's suffered the most. Don't get me wrong, but of course her husband has suffered as well. And he's been on hunger strike, and he's doing incredible stuff, really, trying to keep this in the public eye and keep this in public attention, and be, frankly, an incredibly dedicated individual. What do you reckon they must be feeling at the moment?
Well, I think he's a hugely impressive guy, and all credit to him. And of course, he has had to look after their daughter. And the daughter was very, very young when this all began. And she's now older and can probably more easily understand what's going on. But they will be thrilled to bits, and they're entitled now to try to rebuild a normal family life. And I'm sure they will, because both Nazarin, her husband, and the child clearly are all very remarkable people. They've had to put up with a terrible experience, which most of us, thank God, have never had to address. And they seem to have come through it in a very, very impressive way. So I hope they now can have a normal life that most of us are able to some degree, take for granted, and they have not been able to.
Yeah, and the final point, on that point of perhaps we take our country for granted. I mean, now we've got sanctions against Russia. Boris Johnson is now having to negotiate with Saudi Arabia in relation to oil. And now we also have this situation with Iran. Does it kind of put into perspective somewhat the reality of the amount of regimes that engage in very questionable and, frankly, inhumane practices around the world?
Well, there's never been a period when the world doesn't have some pretty ghastly dictators doing horrid things. If we were sitting having this discussion in 1939, it would be even worse than it is at the moment, because we would have the whole of Western Europe either controlled by Adolf Hitler or involved in being occupied, as France was, the Netherlands, all these countries. So compared to where we were at that time, or during the Cold War, when there was a serious prospect of the Cold War becoming a hot war, and that really would have been a third world war. So I'm not trying to minimize what's going on in Ukraine. I know Ukraine well. I have deep enthusiasm for the people of Ukraine. They're remarkable people. One of the objectives of the international community is, first of all, to get the Russians out of Ukraine, but secondly, to ensure that war does not spread beyond the borders of Ukraine.
Look, Sir Malcolm, thank you very much for coming on at very short notice and giving us your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. So Malcolm Rifkind there, former Foreign Secretary and former Chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, so a heavyweight guest on, frankly, a very, very heavyweight issue, actually.